Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jeremy.
How was everybody's Labor Day?
Extremely hot.
We managed to get up the coast to Shelter Cove in the Lost Coast, and it was foggy and 60 degrees. And
Oh, I don't want to hear that.
no, I'm dreaming of it right now. Anna, look at me. I'm getting all over the place.
Oh,
Hopefully, this is the worst.
Yeah, last night we don't have air conditioning, so last night we actually laid down on the deck for instead of going to bed. We lay down on the deck for a few hours.
We have, as you know, 5 cats, and watching them all over the house trying to find the coolest spot with no air conditioning is one of the funniest things that I've seen in the last few days. They just pancake themselves into the ground.
yeah.
Wow.
We have a small pool of water out where our fountain is, and all the critters come to get a drink, including the deer. And there was a big, either 6 or 8 point buck out there who decided to just lie down in the shade right next to the water because he might need it again. After a while, he got up and left. But it's everybody. We can see all the animals are having trouble with it.
Yeah, and I bet that buck was chasing away half your animals. So, Jennifer, you're muted.
Why did I get a message and nobody else did?
What?
You know
You
why?
got a message?
You know what I think happened? We were looking at it that there may have been a setting that said 5 minutes before the meeting, and like 3:55 it's active. So we're looking to see if that was an issue or not.
Yeah, because I joined in with the instructions.
Right.
And then it said that yeah, obviously
Yeah.
I don't
I'm not
have.
sure what that is. So
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a setting, I think, as I was talking about it with Melissa, there's a setting that says allow people in 5 minutes before the meeting or something. So if you came in 6 or 7 minutes before the meeting, it may have told you something about it's not ready yet.
But I'm starting the meeting. I mean, I have to start it with my password, right? If Jeremy's not here.
oh no, it should just turn on.
Yeah, it will turn on automatically now. So you now log in as yourself, not as the webmaster at Portola Valley.
Oh, I don't have to use the password?
Correct.
Oh,
It means that you're not a host now, so you won't be able to mute other people and kick them out of the meeting and that kind of stuff. But the meeting will start, and it should automatically, it's automatically recording and everything. So
okay.
Well, then, Craig, who is the host?
there is no host. So if somebody were to log in as webmaster, then they would get the host. But this is a hostless meeting.
It has its
Well, what if
it has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that it's generally a lot smoother to get the meeting going. The disadvantage that I've seen, at least in one meeting, is that if you have people who aren't muting, it's pretty challenging. We had a resident who was at the concert 2 weeks ago. Was that when it was, Nona? 2 weeks ago? Who we got to hear about 3 minutes of the band playing. It was great, but we couldn't hear anything else. So
MJ, the alternative is to have a host, but the problem is you then either need to have a separate Zoom account that costs $100 a month per person for each committee, or you need to share an account, in which case Zoom's security features say you're logging in from a place you don't normally log in from, and then it doesn't let you in.
Oh, well then, so what happens if we get, a troll?
We'll deal with that when it happens.
I'm more worried about somebody who doesn't mute. So does this solve the problem of the 2 meetings can't use? So we can have 2 meetings going on at once if need be. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And it also solves the problem of sometimes you can't start the meeting because the system won't let you log in because it sent an email confirmation code to an email address you don't have access to.
Just FYI, I didn't get that information.
Others have, yeah.
So I'm beginning to feel like I'm not included here. Okay, so let's start our meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. So we have MJ, I am here, we have Wanda, we have Dee, we have Nona, we have Craig. Good afternoon, and I hope most of you have air conditioning. So we're going to start out with oral communications for items not on the agenda. I do want to say that if you lose power and you just want to continue with audio, and for some reason you can't zoom in, you could call me and I'll put you on speaker just in case we have a power outage. I don't know if that helps anybody. And I wanted to point out we have a brand new website for the Wildfire Committee, thanks to the hard work of MJ and Carrie Chin. It is an incredible website with a ton of more information, so much easier to use. If you have not looked at it, please do. It is really something. I learned a whole bunch going through the website, and thank you, MJ, because I know that was a lot of work, and thank you, Carrie, which I've already sent an email to thanking her. Okay. Does anyone on the committee have something that is not on the agenda? Is there anyone in the public that has something that's not on the agenda? Okay. All right. So then I'd like to move to approve the minutes from August 2nd. And again, thank you, MJ, for the wonderful minutes. We so appreciate you doing that. So I'd like to see a show of hands for approval of the minutes. MJ, me, Wanda, D, Nona, and Craig doesn't vote. Okay, so unanimous approval. Great. So do we have both of our presenters here? We have Craig.
Yeah, Craig and Christian are both here.
Great. Okay, so I am thrilled that Mid-Peninsula Open Space District is with us today. I'd like to introduce Skyline Area Manager Craig Beckman and Field Resource Specialist Christian Bonner, who are going to give us an update on fire mitigation work in Portola Valley. Thank you both. The floor is yours.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jennifer and members of the committee. Thank you so much for having us. We just have a real quick presentation that we want to give, which is an overview of our wildfire resilience program, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I'm going to share my screen here. Please let me know when and if you can see it.
Looks good, Christian.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So this is a relatively new program for the district, Wildland Fire Resiliency Program. The general goals and objectives are to allow for increased environmental sensitive vegetation management. And the program is designed to protect natural and cultural resources, expand landscape level ecological resilience to changing climate and fire risk conditions, and facilitate ecologically sensitive wildland fire response and training while enhancing public safety and education. So that's a little bit of a mouthful. That's from our EIR that we wrote that was specific for this program that gives us authorization to do a lot of the work. And if I continue on here, we have a lot of work. We have over 60,000 acres that the district, currently manages. And so we have a lot of work to do in terms of fire mitigation. There's a lot of ground to cover. And we came up in the EIR, we came up with this process of how do we prioritize the fuel reduction work that needs to be done on the ground, given the incredibly large scope of work that needs to be done. So we came up with this prioritization process. We call it, tier 1, tier 2, kind of areas or zones that rise to the top, essentially, in areas that we want to plan to treat and then move forward with treating them. And so there's 10 of them. I'm not going to read through all of them, but It includes, various different categories, attributes that we consider, for instance, whether or not an area is within 200 feet of emergency response infrastructure, such as like a fire station, which is pretty obvious, or maybe a landing zone or a water tank or something of that nature. Also, another one is 300 feet within a hospital or a nursing home or a school. So relevant to this group, we've recently done some work in Windy Hill that we'll talk more about, that's in close proximity to the Sequoia's retirement home. So that's part of why that work rose to the top, is it went through this prioritization process that we have about where we want to plan to do the work and then move forward with doing the work. Just kind of backing up a little bit, there's a lot of open space in our area, and we're really fortunate to have all this, natural resources kind of at our disposal. Some of that is mid-pen land, and some isn't. And I just included this map here, which is identifying all the open space areas that are immediately adjacent to and nearby the town of Portola Valley. So those that are highlighted in green, kind of dark green there, those are managed by mid-pen open space. But as you can see, there are several different other entities and agencies that also manage open space nearby Portola Valley, such as the city of Palo Alto, Portola Valley itself, Stanford University, and the Audubon Society, just to name a few there. So the areas that we're working on, where we have work in progress or is recently completed, again, within Portola Valley or just immediately adjacent to, that's what this map is highlighting here. And I've just listed them all. Windy Hill is obviously the big one, because that's right within, the city limits. And then other ones that are adjacent to the community are Russian Ridge, Thornwood. We've done a lot of work out there and continuing to do work out in Thornwood. Los Trancos and Montebello. Those are separate preserves, but the work that we did was kind of right across the street from one another, so immediately kind of adjacent to one another. And Los Trancos in particular abuts Portola Valley. And then also in Coal Creek, we recently completed some work. So all of the projects that I listed, with the exception of Coal Creek, are being funded in large part by grants that the district receives. And so those are all within the current grant that we're just wrapping up right now. It ends in the end of December, the end of this month. So work is wrapping up as we speak. And SCC stands for the State Coastal Conservancy. And we have several grants that we've gotten through their agency and continue to apply for. So we have good relationship with that agency, and they've been a real effective partner. And so, yeah, all the projects that I've listed there were done with the SCC grant funds, or in part with the SCC grant funds, with the exception of Coal Creek, which was a Prop 68 grant that we completed in 2020. So those are the areas in which we're doing the work. And before we actually go to work, there's a lot of kind of planning that we have to do, the background work that, you don't necessarily see on the ground. And one of those big aspects of the planning process is identifying resources, natural resources, cultural resources, and archaeological resources, and protecting them. So here's an image of a wood rat nest. If you're not familiar with it, it's a very common wildlife native to our area. And it's a cute little critter there, but they make these little nests, which is just kind of a pile of sticks. It's a great, kindling pile, and maybe not conducive to reducing wildfire risk, but we need to balance, the work that we're doing to reduce the severity of wildfire when and if it does occur, and protecting natural resources as these. I included this image here because it's one of the biggest challenges we have. It's also one of the most commonly occurring natural resources that we work around when we're doing fuel reduction work. So biological resources, we'll have a monitor go out, a biological survey is conducted. They map where all the resources are and then flag them in the field. And then we have to, figure out how to kind of work around them. Other resources that we're managing are botanical resources. An example of that is like the Kings Mountain manzanita, for instance. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's endemic to our area. There's some of it in the Thornwood Preserve. And it's a very, rare plant, and we certainly don't want to impact it while we're doing our work. So we have to work around that. Other resources are cultural, old structures or fences or other type of resources that we want to work around. And of course, archaeological resources, any type of Native American, burial sites or resources that we want to protect. So that's kind of background. We also, jumped through some other hoops, like the work that we did in Thornwood. We had to get, tree removal permits from the town of Woodside, and they were really cooperative. And of course, we've coordinated with Portola Valley at the work that we did on Windy Hill as well. And then once kind of all those pieces of the puzzle are in place, then we bring in the resources to get the work done. And that's primarily, bodies and equipment, both mid-pen staff. We have, existing maintenance staff, but this is a new program, as I mentioned previously, for the district. So we're continuing to kind of build up and staff the program. Right now, we're relying pretty heavily on contracting a lot of the work out. And so that's one of my main roles with the district, is to get those contracts in place and manage that work. So this is just an example of some of that equipment, a masticator on a bobcat loader out at Skyline Preserve, going through coyote brush, essentially like a monoculture of coyote brush there. You may be able to see in the foreground, kind of to the front left as I'm looking at the screen, there's kind of a little patch of coyote brush that was left, and people see that might ask, well, like, oh, why didn't you go around that? Well, I can see kind of vague outline of a ribbon or tape around that little patch, and that probably means that there was a nest in there that we were protecting. So we kind of have to, create these islands essentially of, wildlife refuge, with the work that we're doing. Other examples, the Thornwood escape route. There's an access road that goes through the preserve from Highway 84 to Espinosa Grandview community. And the intent of the work that we're doing out here is definitely to reduce the, severity of wildfire, to provide access to, emergency equipment, suppression agencies, and then also to provide an escape route for the community if it was needed, so they have an alternative way out of there if necessary. And so this is the work after this was actually, we've done additional work out there since this image was taken, but this is initially just 30 feet on either side of the road, just raising it up, making it a safe passage through there. We've since gone through another 70 feet on either side of the road. So there's a large 100-foot buffer on either side of the road. Other areas, Windy Hill, just adjacent to the Sequoia retirement community out there. In the Neely property, the image in the lower left is before, and the image in the upper right is after. So a lot of the work that we're doing is like a shaded fuel break, not necessarily gonna, cease, any type of potential for, wildland fire. That's not really a realistic or achievable goal in a lot of instances, but reducing all the ladder fuels, thinning out the existing vegetation that's there. So when and if a wildfire does occur, that it is low in severity, it's a ground fire, it doesn't get up into the crown, and it allows suppression agencies to get in there and get a foothold, before it does become something that is out of control. In a lot of these instances, I'm sorry, just kind of backing up, in our prioritization process, a lot of what we identified, and I'll just scroll to the next slide, is areas around high use, such as parking lot areas where ignition sources are more likely. And there's areas that are potential staging areas for emergency equipment, and also can provide temporary refuge for the general public if necessary. So that's what a lot of the work is that we're doing right now and have recently completed. And a lot of it is kind of, you know, the low hanging fruit, so to speak, because again, we need to start our efforts somewhere. This is again, the Montebello and Los Trancos parking lot. This is just a map of the buffered area that we completed fuel reduction in. And this is just some images of both of those sites, kind of looking down on the Los Trancos parking lot. And then looking down on the Montebello parking lot. Again, on the image on the lower portion of the screen, you can see in the foreground, there's kind of like a little patch of coyote brush that was left. Again, that's probably a nest area that we had to work around. But, you know, kind of all the coyote brush monoculture and the little island there and in front of the truck, that was all reduced. Okay, and so what I've spoken of so far is just like our fuel reduction work. And this is other fuel reduction work that the district is doing that kind of falls outside of kind of our routine, like shaded fuel break. The parking area safety zones I mentioned, community escape routes are listed there. And then the last thing that's listed there is what we consider like forest health type of fuel reduction work. And that's going in more remote areas in many instances. It still has to fall within the prioritization process like the tier 1, tier 2, but not necessarily focusing on like a high use area. Maybe going into some of these preserves and doing a thinning process that it's going to reduce the fuel loads, but it's also going to improve the health of the forest. You know, like for instance, reducing the number of trees per acre so that the remaining trees, you know, are healthier and have a better rate of growth that more mimics a natural system in which, you know, fire hasn't been suppressed for, you know, decades or centuries. So this is just a kind of map of, you know, other projects that the district is conducting, you know, in the area and nearby. So moving forward, just projects that we have planned nearby Portola Valley. As I mentioned earlier, we are wrapping up our current SCC grant, and we're in the process of applying for a new grant, which is scheduled to begin in 2023, also with the SCC. We're pretty far along in the process, so we're positive that we will be able to begin work. We've already began some of the planning that I mentioned, like identifying the resources that are out there. And a lot of that work is adjacent to Portola Valley in Windy Hill in particular, in the Hawthorne property, the Hawthorne area. And I think I have a couple maps of it a little bit further on, so I'll show those. And then in the Willowbrook area along Alpine Road, on the Windy Hill side of Alpine Road. And then that's probably where we're going to start in 2023 in all likelihood. I don't know that that's been finalized yet. And then it's a 3-year grant, and then we'll move on to Russian Ridge and Skyline Ridge, Alpine Road, going over on the other side of Skyline Boulevard. That work down along Midpen property from essentially Skyline Boulevard to Portola State Park Road. So that will be future work that we're in the process of planning now, but is likely funded, or a good portion of it is funded. So yeah, just drilling down on the work in Windy Hill, you can see the little in the kind of upper right, the Hawthorne property, where we're likely to get started working. And we met with Woodside Fire Protection District, as mentioned in one of the prioritization considerations is input from local fire agencies. So if this group or any individuals in this group, you know, want to have input in the process of what gets prioritized, the best way to go about that is to speak with your local fire agency. In this case, it'd be Woodside Fire, and let them know about areas that you would like, that you're either concerned with or you have questions with. You know, Don with Woodside Fire is very accessible and he's happy to meet with you. And areas that you think would be a good to prioritize. And so The Hawthorne property is an area that Woodside Fire identified as a high priority. So it gave it an extra point in our prioritization process. And that, along with all the other considerations, made it rise to the top. And that's what we currently have planned. And then also in the Willowbrook area, you can see kind of that stretch there along Alpine Road and Lower Alpine Road. The kind of brown area, the brown areas are the tier 1 and tier 2 prioritization areas. And I know the map is a little bit messy. My apologies. But that's what we have planned to begin in 2023. And then other work in Windy Hill. This is Upper Windy Hill along Skyline Ridge. Again, the brown areas are areas that are tier 1, tier 2. The district actually has a lot of existing fire suppression or fuel reduction work that it conducts on an ongoing routine basis, namely shaded fuel breaks and disc lines that are adjacent to the highway. If you've ever driven along that stretch, you'll notice that there's a disc line adjacent to that. And we're also coordinating and cooperating with other agencies such as San Mateo Fire Safe that currently has a grant to do all of Highway 35, including a portion of this Windy Hill Preserve. So we're cooperating with them, working with them, helping them to coordinate the work on district property. Excuse me. And yeah, this is just a little bit more zoomed in look at the Thornwood open space escape route that I mentioned earlier. That area that's in teal or looks maybe like a light green on your screen, that goes right through the middle of the preserve. That's the shaded fuel break escape route that we're currently working on, 100 feet on either side of the road. The brown area is future work that we have planned, again, with San Mateo Fire Safe Council. And the green along Highway 84 was previously completed work that was done on district land. That was also San Mateo Fire Safe, and that was about 5 years ago. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this is just kind of the process for giving input about areas that the district could potentially prioritize in terms of doing the work. Again, we have a lot of work in front of us, and it's a relatively new program. So reaching out to the town of Portola Valley, who can give input to Woodside Fire, or reaching out to Woodside Fire directly to give input there. And then that would be considered in the prioritization process. And we would consider that. So essentially every year we develop an annual work plan and we consider where the priorities are and what work is going to be planned going forward. Also, the district is currently in the process of developing an EIR for our prescribed fire program. As I mentioned, we have a EIR for the wildland fire resiliency work that we're doing. And a component of that is prescribed burn. So this is an opportunity also for the public to give input as we're writing the EIR. As many of you may know, there is a public input process as we are creating that. So right now is a good opportunity to give feedback for that. We just, I'm a little bit excited about the prescribed fire. You know, it's another tool that we can use to manage fuels. We need kind of as many tools as we can get in our toolbox. You know, going out there and, you know, physically, reducing fuels is a big part of it, you know, both with staff and with contractors and by hand and using equipment. And this is just another tool that we can use to manage fire and manage fuels. So with that, I think I will end it there and just ask if there are any questions or comments.
So thank you so much. Yes, I'm sure there's going to be questions, and in case I forget, don't wait for an invitation. Just let me know when you have an update. We are always delighted to have you. Okay, so if you could release the screen so that I can see everybody's hands.
Okay.
And questions from the committee.
I have a question.
Nona, you don't, okay, Nona, I cannot see everybody. Nona, you don't have a question?
Wanda has one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Wanda, your question.
Can you tell us the approximate size of that wood rat nest? Is it inches or feet? And why are wood rats important?
Yeah, good question. Sorry about the echo.
Hey, Christian, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Yeah, will
Thanks.
do. Bear with me just a moment here. Navigate to-
Can you move your cursor to the other screen? There you go. Now go up to the top and
Thank
stop
you.
share. There
Thank
you go.
Great. All right, got a little technical assistance there. Okay, so first question was wood rat nest. Yeah, that wood rat nest that we show, that was definitely feet. That was probably about 4 or 5 feet in height and probably a similar diameter. So they get real big. A lot of times, well, sometimes they occur up in the crown or the canopy of the tree. We saw a lot of that in Windy Hill. That we don't always see that behavior. But, you know, we need to protect those as well, you know, whether it's on the ground or, you know, aerial, it's a resource we need to protect. And then I'm sorry, the second part of your question was, can you remind me?
Yeah, why are wood rats important to protect?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I don't know, and maybe Craig can help me out a little bit here. I know that they are if I'm not mistaken, a species of concern. I don't think that they are rare or endangered. Our local population is pretty healthy. I can attest to that from doing a lot of the work out in the field. But regionally, our local population is good, but on a larger, like statewide level, a lot of their habitat has been compromised. Both by development and fragmentation. So we just need to make sure that we are, you know, doing the work in accordance with kind of best practices in terms of natural resource management. And we work really closely with our natural resource department. There have been instances in which we have trapped the wood rats and moved them if their nests are in an area where, like, look, we can't really effectively reduce fuel here and, you know, reduce the severity of fire with leaving the nest right there in that area. So we bring in a biological or a biologist, and they come in and trap the rats, and they move their nest to another location. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Sure.
Nona, go ahead.
Yeah, my question was whether when you get grants from the Coastal Conservancy, does that also provide funds for assessment and monitoring of the success of what you're doing in terms of both reducing fire risk, but also protecting natural resources, that balance that you mentioned?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's definitely baked in our program. I mean, we're required to do it as part of our wildland fire resiliency program. Monitoring is a component of that. A lot of these grants that we're receiving are 1-year or 3-year grants. So there may be some language in there, like it's going to strengthen the district's position for applying for a grant, receiving a grant, when we can show them that monitoring is part of our program. But is it necessarily a requirement of the grant? Not necessarily. It varies, of course, on the different agencies and the duration of the grant. But again, a lot of them what we're receiving right now are, you know, just one or 3 years. And so like a monitoring requirement that the district would report on for, you know, any lengthy period of time, it's not a component of those shorter grants. But
I
that's a
guess
really good question.
If I could just follow up quickly.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is that it would be really valuable to, you know, to get lessons learned from the post-modification, you know, experience and monitoring. And also whether or not, you know, some fuel reduction efforts can make things worse. Some things make it a lot better, depending on whether you have invasive plants come in, all of those things. And so for actually, you know, sort of learning best practices, it's really helpful to have that follow-up monitoring for more than a couple of years, potentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And, you know, what I provided there in terms of the planning process with like the resource protection, I mean, that's really only just a sliver of our planning process. I mean, we do our fuel reduction work as part of the program, you know, in cooperation with like our IPM program, for instance. we're identifying invasive species, we're treating them as part of the fuel reduction work, so that, we don't create, a problem that's worse in the future. So yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, hopefully now let me also fall back and say that, like, the SCC grant that we're currently in the process of applying for, it's also a capacity building grant. So it's paying for a portion of, kind of the seed money to get a couple positions started with the district that are in, the resource protection kind of department or field, so that we have more resources to monitor our work and our activities for a long term on an ongoing basis. And that is something that the district is committed to as well. A good question.
Great, thanks, Nona. So I have a couple of questions. I read the budget and action plan for 2022. It's very impressive. And so I identified two projects that would impact Portola Valley: the fuel reduction implementation program and the wildland fire resiliency program. So in the fire reduction implementation program, I see this year, and this is primarily for vegetation management, I see you spent about total 680,000 this year, and next year you're going to spend about 660,000. How much of that was spent in Portola Valley?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that I have a dollar answer for you right off the top of my head with Portola Valley. I can narrow that down and say, I believe the 600K figure that you provided is for district wide. And so for the Skyline area, which includes Portola Valley, it includes, all those areas that I was showing on my map, that's a region of the district, just from like our management, our like internal management system. It's split between the Foothills and Skyline office. So for the Skyline office, our budget is about 400K of that amount. So we're doing a lot more fuel reduction work than the Foothills area is. So, but I'm sorry, I don't have a dollar figure for you for Portola Valley, but I can try to look that up and get you more specifics.
Yeah, it's just that it's hard. I'm not as experienced as Nona, and I know she probably knows so much more about open space, but it's hard for me to visualize how much has really been done in the Windy Hill area. How much safer should I feel? How much this year has been done, how much next year is going to be done. So, I mean, if it's not too much trouble, I would actually love to see how much is actually getting spent on Windy Hill, which is what we are concerned about, and a little bit more specifics about exactly what has been done. And then, do you have anything other to respond?
Well, I was just going to add, I think it would be a challenge for me to pinpoint what's been done from a cost perspective, what's been done in Windy Hill. I can definitely give you the number of acres. I think off the top of my head, like the fuel reduction work that we recently completed adjacent to the Sequoias was approximately 3 acres. That doesn't include the fuel reduction work that we continually maintain in terms of the disc lines in upper Windy Hill. So I can give you the acres. I think to give you a dollar amount would be a challenge because I have to kind of parcel it all out. I will say that, let's see, the SCC grant, that was a $400,000 grant as well. And I guess I could give you like a percentage of the acreage that was treated, but it would be more of a challenge for me to kind of parcel out the cost with that.
Well, I mean, if the fire district, do they have a wish list for you to do? And, is it 30% done? Or are they 100% happy? Is there certain areas of Windy Hill that are 100% happy?
Sure. Yeah, they identified that area in Hawthorne that we discussed, and they helped to identify the area adjacent to the Sequoias. And we've done some previous work in Hawthorne as well. And the area along in the Willowbrook area along Alpine Road. They identified that as well. So I don't think it's too much of a reach for me to say all of the priority areas that they've identified to us that we are currently in the process of planning, which is pretty good. I mean, you know, again, back to, you know, 60,000 acres that we're managing. And, you know, we're planning those within the next 3 years, and we've identified, you know, potential funding sources. So I'm sorry, I can't give you an exact, you know, percentage of what they've requested, but
We are so happy that you're here. We're so excited that this has become a priority for Mid-Penn. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I not at all. Okay, that's great. So in the next 3 years, you're going to get to the priorities of the fire district and then move on to their second tier wish list in the following 3 years?
yeah, I mean, again, we're currently planning everything that they've identified, you know, to us. The tier system, just, you know, for clarification, that's our system, that's the district system. And it's entirely possible that they could say, like, look, this is a priority for us, but in our prioritization process, the district prioritization process, you know, that gives the area or the project like a point out of the 10 points that I listed with all those criteria. So it's possible that they could say, look, we'd like you guys to work out here. And we kind of plug that into, you know, that, you know, kind of calculus, and it doesn't rise to the top. You know, in theory, that's definitely possible.
Thank you. Okay, so, and then I just wanted to move on to the Wildland Fire Resiliency Program. So there was a budget item to hire a field specialist. Are you that field specialist?
Yes. So I was brought on about 9 months ago, 9 or 10 months. Yeah, time flies while you're having fun. And then we brought on another field specialist for the foothills area that I mentioned earlier. And I think that's probably what you're referring to.
So there's 2 years for this year and next year. There's about 260, and then the next year is $235,000 budgeted for this program, and this includes that prescribed fire program. So you should be on your way with that program. Do you think that we will see prescribed fire in Windy Hill? Are you looking at that? And if so, when do you think that might actually be discussed and approved? And
that's a good question. Yeah. So the EIR is scheduled to be completed in 2023 for the prescribed fire. And you know, then we can actually start, you know, getting projects on the ground. And I'll defer to Craig on this, but what I know of so far is the areas that we are prioritizing is areas that the district has previously treated, has previously conducted prescribed burns on. But whether or not they're in Windy Hill, I'm not as familiar with that program. Do you happen to know, Craig?
Yeah, part of this EIR is going to help us develop some reasons why we would or would not work.
We can't, Christian, we can't really hear that.
I'll mute.
Let me try this one, Jeremy.
You got a little bit of feedback there, Craig. Sorry.
Go ahead and just turn off your sound, or I'll come over to you. We'll try.
Sorry, guys. Hey, Craig.
So we, in the EIR, will be discussing reasons why we would have priorities to implement prescribed fire and where that might be. We've spoken briefly to Don Bullard, who is supportive of use of prescribed fire. We'd be working closely with the Woodside Fire Department to determine if there are locations that are appropriate. You know, they have containment lines that are manageable, the size of the fire, the seasonality of the fire. There's a lot of issues that would need to go into determining if and when we do anything in Windy Hill and Portola Valley. But the EIR gives us the environmental clearance process to allow that to happen. Can't guarantee you either way if and when it's going to be a priority in Windy Hill at this point. I see that as a good large-scale tool to manage fuel, but I also see risks in the community, and getting the timing right and being sure that the community is safe is a huge component of that may or may not work out in Portola Valley. So there's a long way to go, I think. We hope to have some fire on the ground in about a year, probably up in Russian Ridge where we've burned before. But to hit the ground in Windy Hill is probably some years after that. but at least the possibility's there.
Okay, and then I'm sorry, I have one more question. I read the whole budget report, which is very large, so I get to ask questions. As far as the Hawthorne area, there is a historic complex, and I know that you budgeted money to replace the roof. And I think that's a wood structure. Have you considered any other home hardening measures such as ember resistant vents or external sprinklers? Because that's a big fuel source right in the middle of an open space.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know there's been a lot of, suggestions and ideas about, what to do with the property. I know that, just defensible space at minimum is something that the district certainly plans on doing. Some of the fire hardening to the structure itself, then we run into challenges of, maintaining like a historic structure and some of the, restrictions that are associated with that. And also determining like what level of investment is acceptable for the district to do to a structure that its fate is yet to be determined. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that, but I do know that, just defensible space at minimum is certainly planned.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to go to Jeremy and David, then you are next. Jeremy?
Yeah, thank you, Craig and Christian. It's good seeing you guys. Maybe you should see me. I'll turn my camera on. Just maybe more of a comment than anything else. The town has been working very hard on its external communications on news and information. We have a weekly newsletter that we've refreshed and the like. And if there's anything that you guys would like us to include in that as it relates to the work you're doing, please feel free to reach out to me or Carrie Chin on the staff. And I would, what I have found in my 6+ years in town is that the more information, the better for this community. So anything that's going on related to the work that you're doing, even if it means you're getting a little credit, I mean, that's not a bad thing at all. So feel free to, on a regular basis, we'll include that and get that out, just so people know that these partnerships are fruitful and we're seeing action. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, we appreciate it. And we definitely want to cooperate, continue to cooperate. And, just having the opportunity to present to this committee, I think, it's definitely to the direction that we want to be going in.
You are welcome back anytime to give an update. Okay, we have a few questions from our community. David, thank you for your patience.
Oh, sure. Thank you. 3 quick comments. First of all, I think that's a great job. As hard as it's been for us to clear our little over an acre, I mean, for what you guys are able to do, that's amazing to me. I think that's great. In particular, I do love that you're paying attention to some of our local species, like the dusky-footed wood rats. They're the rat name doesn't help them any, but they're also known as pack rats. They were here before us. Frankly, people taking them out in their homes actually makes it more likely that the nasty roof Norway black rats come in and rip their houses apart. So if we want to preserve our environment, it's not just a matter of keeping a few bushes and trees. These are the species that make our world happen. So I think that's good. That's incredible. And they're surprisingly cute compared to the annoying rats we get in our houses. Finally, I think this is a great role model for all the large landowners in town. And I would love to see every large property owner, whether it's Stanford or the school district or vineyards or just estates that have a lot of land, have to file a similar kind of plan and say what they're doing, because that's a huge piece of the property in our town is large properties, and they're not easy to manage. Thank you.
Okay, Sid.
Thanks, Christian, for your service in trying to help us all. I'm one of the 300 residents at the Sequoias, half of whom do not drive. If there's an emergency, there's going to be a problem getting them out. And I noticed a huge amount of vegetation, large trees right up to the edge of the property, along the Windy Hill margin abutting the property. I wondered what the prospect is for reducing some of that fuel load.
So again, the area that we treated, let's see, that would be to the north. Yeah. And I know that there is some additional tree removal work that is immediately behind the sequoias adjacent to the parking lot. And there's a retaining wall there. I know that we have some additional tree removal work that is planned in that area. Is that the area that you're referring to?
No, I'm not. I'm talking about the large section of the sequoias that abuts directly to the west into the Windy Hill Preserve. Just to the left, if you will, of if you're facing the Windy Hill, left of a pond for several thousand feet. There's a tremendous amount of large trees and vegetation immediately adjacent to our property.
So, okay, thank you. So left of the pond as you're looking at it from the Sequoia parking lot, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
So
from the parking lot, from the sequoias.
Right. So
Looking toward the ocean.
Yep. So would that not be kind of at the top of the retaining wall? Am I mistaken?
I don't know what retaining wall you're talking about.
Well, the parking lot, if I'm recalling correctly, the parking lot for the Sequoias is at a lower elevation than the kind of road or trail that's up above in Windy Hill. Like the tree that I'm thinking of in particular, it's, right at the top of a, sizable retaining wall. It's like 10 or 15 feet in height. So I'm just trying to kind of orientate myself to, the area that you're referring to.
Christian and Sid, would it be helpful if I shared a screen on a map to?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
On just a second. Sid, tell me when I'm getting warm.
Down, slide down to the there. That area all along that length of, there you go. All through there and further south. Further south.
Christian, this spot.
Oh,
Here.
that whole length there.
Yeah. So the only area that we currently have planned is again, kind of closer to the preserve parking lot area of the section that you were just circling. There is some additional tree removal that's scheduled, like a couple, evergreen conifers, Monterey pines that we're gonna take out of there. But nothing else planned along that section that's immediately adjacent to the parking lot. We did do some additional fuel reduction as part of what I recently described in that area.
The
It
prevailing,
was more of a, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, I'm just going to say the prevailing westerly winds of 20 to 30 miles an hour come directly toward us from the area that I just pointed out to you. And I hope some attention can be given to that area. I don't take more of your time.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about it with you further offline. What I was going to add was just the work that we recently completed was more along the lines of a shaded fuel break work. So, we didn't go through there and remove all of the fuel. What we typically do is, we remove the shrubs and the ground, vegetation and, limb up the trees to reduce the ladder fuels and the fuels accumulated along the, ground to limit the potential for a crown fire. So, just maybe having an understanding of, the nature of the work that's going to be performed in terms of like a shaded fuel break versus, a true fuel break is probably more along the lines of like a disc line, that we have up along Skyline. But Sid, I'm happy to talk about that, with you further. If you want to shoot me an email, I'm happy to come out, take a look at it with you and maybe make sure we're referring to the same location. And then also I can show you kind of examples of work that we've performed so far, just so that you're kind of clear on what the expectation is in terms of, the work that we could be.
Thank you for your generous offer, Christian.
And Christian and Sid, I just connected you both by email. So happy talking.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And Christian, I just want to emphasize that we are very concerned about sequoias, especially, in the case of a fire.
Sure.
That community is going to have difficulties evacuating. So we want to pay special attention to that. Okay. And if I mispronounce your name, please correct me. Is it Serena?
Yes.
Okay, Serena.
Hi, I'm also at Sequoias, and we've just been having a lot of discussion that Sid and Jeremy were both involved in about fire mitigation at Sequoias. Nona's been a tremendous help in putting that together. Your slides were fabulous. I was wondering whether it was possible to get a copy of your slides, I was particularly interested in your prioritization list of what, as you think about this, doing things in Windy Hill, what your prioritization points were.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share the presentation with Jennifer or the group. Jennifer, I can email that over to you. And then, so the prioritization list is obviously in the presentation, but it also exists in the district's EIR.
Okay.
I believe there's a copy of online as part of the Wildland Fire Mitigation Program. That prioritization process is in there, and it goes into a little bit more detail than just the list.
And Serena, we are recording this so you can actually listen to the presentation again. It'll be posted right now. It's on YouTube right now. I mean, literally within
That's
minutes.
marvelous. Thank you very much. I've learned a tremendous amount listening in on your committee over the last months.
Oh, I'm so thrilled. Thank you. Dudley, you're next.
Thank you. Forgive me for being invisible. It's essential at this moment. And thank you so much for this presentation, which is a lot of really helpful information for all of us. I wanted to go back to Jennifer's mention of the structures on the Hawthorne property, the historic ones along Los Trancos Road. And I recognize that what you're presenting here today is a plan going forward, but I'm concerned about the immediate issues as well as the longer term. And I wonder if you could talk to us briefly about what you're doing to approach the issue of potential arson, either intentional or not, should there be vandals or teenagers or any kind of intrusion into the area around those properties. I know there's some fencing. I don't know how successful it would be in keeping anyone out of the structures. I don't know if there are cameras, and you might not want to tell us that, but that sort of issue, because of the proximity of those structures to a rather large number of homes in Portola Valley. Thanks.
Good question. Christian, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm going to defer to Craig on this one, who's a lot more familiar with the Hawthorne property.
Yeah, so we are revisiting what the future use of those buildings might be. So at the moment, we had one plan that was moving forward that is no longer. So we'll be considering whether we're going to keep the buildings at all. But in the interim, we do have a ranger that lives on that property that passes through there on a regular basis. We do have an alarm system out there that activates with motion detectors and gives us an alarm to that ranger to respond. We've had, I consider, relatively few problems, not zero, but relatively few problems there. Mostly trespass, haven't had any so far, any kind of arson or that type of vandalism at this point. But we will continue that alarm system and respond to manage those properties as needed. But right now, the buildings were pending a board decision on the direction of where those buildings go in the future.
Thanks. That's very helpful, and I appreciate it. I'm particularly aware of the frequency with which kids smoking after school in out-of-the-way corners happens in this town. And that's one of those things that at this time of year with this kind of temperature would be a Class A disaster. So thanks for what you're doing.
And absolutely, if anybody observes that kind of behavior, at this time of year, I'd consider that a 911 call, but we also do have rangers and a 24-hour dispatch. Call us anytime. We'll send rangers out. If it's not a priority for the sheriffs or the fire department, we'll send rangers out to enforce that kind of regulation on any of our properties where smoking is prohibited. So yeah, definitely give us a call if anybody observes that.
Okay, now No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I had one other follow-up question. This is a great presentation, but I wondered if restoration or regenerative grazing had been as an ongoing method of fuel reduction, because I think that's something that's compatible with sort of the pastoral quality and values of Portola Valley.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yes, so the grazing, conservation grazing is definitely a component of the Wildland Fire Resiliency Program. And we consider that treating fuels, and it goes into our, annual totals of, fuel reduction work that we've done. And, we just like some detailed aspects of it, although I'm not intimately familiar with the program. I know that we will, kind of target certain areas, for grazing, which are potentially a high risk. And it's not only can it be used as a tool for fuel reduction, but it's also used as a tool for resource management as well. Limiting, annual grasses and invasive grasses and, restoring more native components as well. And I'll let kind of Craig expand upon that.
Right now, Windy Hill, although it was grazed prior to Mid-Penn ownership, the infrastructure for water and fencing and public access are not currently there. So it would be a fairly significant effort to bring back cattle grazing on the scale that was there prior to Mid-Penn. We are evaluating the use of goat grazing. There are challenges with having a goat herder out there 24 hours and the mountain lion predation and temporary fencing and things like that might be appropriate. But we are considering a test patch in Windy Hill to bring in some goat grazing and see how that goes. We're not quite ready to roll that out yet, but are looking at it. There are challenges, goat grazing has some benefits, but has some environmental impacts that are a bit of a challenge for us, but we'll continue to look at it. But yeah, cattle grazing on the scale that it used to be is probably not coming back to Windy Hill. It'll probably be, if we're going to do it at all, some localized grazing with something like goat herds.
Thank you.
Oh, Serena, please go ahead. Yeah.
So I was curious as to what the negative environmental aspects of goat grazing were. Sequoia has used it recently to clear out the underbrush along the town trail and various parts of Sequoia's property.
Yeah, no, goat grazing, what choices they make to eat and how intensely you have to graze and how frequently you have to graze. So it depends on what species you're concerned about, what species you want to protect. If you want them to reduce brush, they have to eat everything else that's there before they go after the brush, what choices they make in what they eat. And so by the time they get to the brush that you might want to control, then they've eaten everything else down to bare dirt, and that's more than we would like to see. So they're great in some places. Again, depends on what species you're trying to control, what they're grazing on. There's not that kind of a problem, but for us, it's by the time they get to the brush that we'd like to control, they've already chewed down too much of everything else. So we'd rather manage the brush with other tools typically, but there are places where they're appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay, Christian and Craig, this has been amazing. Please come back in 6 months. Give us another update. Thank you so much for your time. So with that, we'll move on. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jennifer and Jeremy, for inviting us. Have a good day.
Thanks, Christian.
Okay, so our next agenda item is an update on the home hardening code with Fire Marshal Don Bullard. Don? Is he here?
Hey everyone, sorry, my camera's out of service today too, so essentially I'm going to be without a camera here for a little bit, but so home hardening code, not much to report on that. We're still working on it. have more to report in the arena of the comprehensive hazard and risk assessment, which I can go into that for you. But right now, there really isn't much to report on the amendments and the code cycle, because it just haven't gotten to it yet.
Hey, Don, this is Jeremy. Maybe just as a prompt, just to give a little more information. Part of what I understand you and the town's building official have been doing is looking at some things that came up during the last home hardening code update. So there were, if I recall, a half a dozen issues that you were sort of interested in pursuing. You want to summarize any of those just to give a taste to what you're thinking about proposing to the council?
Well, those were just leftover items that we didn't have enough time to complete for the home hardening amendment that we did. And part of that was, if I can remember what all of those were, part of it had to do with projections from the roof and whether or not we wanted to cover the projections with either non-flammable or ignition resistant materials. Another part of that, Jeremy, I don't have the list in front of me right now to go over.
Sorry to put you on the spot, just if there's any.
You're right, though. There was about a half a dozen items that were items that I wanted to be sure that we were going to make sure that those got covered by the 3-year cycle, which would be, in January of 2023. And I've been working with Ron to make sure that those have all been covered. He has those on his list currently right now.
So Don, I was really excited to have the presentation. So I have actually a couple of questions for home hardening codes, if
Sure.
that's okay. And then we have you on the agenda in a few minutes for doing your normal updates. So I have a question. Have you thought about at a district level adding some kind of requirement for certain permits, or when you sell a property that you have to have a defensible space inspection and compliance? Because I know some towns do that.
Well, currently it's done right now in the very high fire severity zones. That was AB 38. And so if you have a property in the very high, you have to have us come out and do an inspection and make sure that when the property is being sold, that they're complying with all of the defensible space requirements. I have not thought about doing that for every property, regardless of what zone you're in. But I can tell you that area of very high fire severity is going to increase when our maps are done. So that's going to capture a lot more home sales when it is done, because that's the current law now.
It just seems to me that would be a very easy way to, we talk about enforcement. That would be a very easy way to make sure that, you take out a permit. Part of getting a permit, you got to have the fire district come out. You've got to have your defensible space created, selling a property. I'm also wondering, could we add a requirement for ember resistant vents when you have a new roof put on, or new windows or sidings or a deck permit? And that would also just start chipping away at having everyone have those installed.
You're talking about on the existing track, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Those are all good ideas that can be explored. I mean, I'm not opposed to any of those ideas. What I want to see is more compliance. Period.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I want to see more compliance. One of the things that I am looking at doing for our 3-year cycle is a administrative citations. So currently, right now, we have to go through this long, lengthy process that is really not ideal. And it ends up costing the fire district a lot of money at the end of the day. And if we have an administrative citation that I can issue on the first attempt to go out and do an inspection on a property and they're not compliant, automatic $100 fine if they don't complete the work within 30 days. If they do the work within 30 days, the fine is adjusted. You don't have to pay the fine. You've done the work. We're happy. We have compliance. If I have to go back out a second time, that fine doubles. And if I have to go back out a third time, it'll be $500 a day every day that the violation continues. So that's something that is, I really need to get people's attention that we're serious about this and we want compliance. And so that's something that's worked for other fire districts. It worked in Ventura County. It's worked over in Orinda Moraga for them. They were under the same system that we're under now. And when they switched over, they felt that it was beneficial for them and they got a lot more compliance. So.
Well, and you're doing a presentation for us next month on defensible space and enforcement. So that'll be exciting to hear.
And I'll include that in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So does anyone have any questions on home hardening code while we're on this subject? Okay. Does anyone in the community have any questions? Okay. Then let's go to subcommittee and committee liaison updates. Does home hardening and vegetation management subcommittee have any updates?
We are continuing to follow up on the decking material question. Now that I'm hearing this part about what Don just said, Dee is working on this. So Dee, maybe you should talk to Don if you don't hear from the building official. Dee and I are also trying to follow up on the R4W sprint. So hopefully we can report on both of these things in October. I was going to say, we've also been working, or we were asked to work on a toolkit for the wildfire preparedness. A lot of that material is now on the committee web pages, but we will look at what else we could do. And then, I know we're running out of time. I'll do the rest of this next time, Jennifer.
You know, we have 20 minutes, MJ.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to share a couple of pictures. Let's see. I'm sorry, it doesn't want to share. Let me try again. Okay.
Jennifer, did I share an article that Steve Quarles wrote on decking with you? Did you get that?
No.
All right, I'll forward that over to you. It will be something that I think you might find interesting.
I think the question, and Dee will be able to ask it more than I would, but the question is specifically on our building code. Dee, why don't you elaborate on that?
Sure. The issue is to clarify what remedies folks have if they just want to replace an existing deck instead of it being non-combustible. Can we clarify the code to include Class A rated composite deck boards as a way for people to improve their situation without having to completely rebuild their decks? And I'm happy to talk about that offline as well.
I'm in agreement with you, and I'm thinking along the same lines of we don't need to get to best and skip over better.
Right.
Give people an opportunity to do things better than what they have now, but they don't have to get to the best point. So I think that's important.
If I can just jump in here, just Jeremy. Dee, the building official that we have on retainer here, he has modified his interpretation of the town's building code on this matter, and we will accept applications for decks that are built with ignition resistant type material instead of non-combustible. We found from as you know very well, just for everybody else in the group here, we found that decking materials on the non-combustible side were basically not there yet for prime time. So the planning department will accept that. So please feel free to disseminate that as you see fit.
Yeah,
Jeremy,
that's great. I'm sorry, we want to make sure we just get the language cleaned up and we're all in agreement. So,
Perfect.
Jeremy,
you.
can we get a something in writing to Dee? So of exactly,
Yep. Let me
now,
ask, I'll ask Ron to put something together.
right, so she can put something out and MJ can actually make this a tip and we can just splash it all around Portola Valley. That is true. See, congratulations, Dee, you fixed it. Just by asking the question, you have fixed the entire problem. That is terrific. That is really good news. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's
Oh,
so,
wow.
so
Okay,
great to
MJ.
hear.
Wow.
Okay, so I just wanted to show, I always talk about how a wooden fence attached to your home is like a wick, leading up to dynamite or whatever. So I just want to share some work I completed a few weeks ago on my home. You can see on the right, this is the kind of fencing I had. And then I replaced it with just a couple of metal poles and just plain, I think it's called pig wire on one side of the house. And then on the other side of the house, I went a little more expensive and I put in a metal
Wow.
gate and fence. This was all wooden fence and it just worried me every time I looked at it when it was all wood. So I just wanted to share that and give people some ideas. That's all I have.
Great. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Finance and insurance is there any questions for the home hardening committee from the community or the committee? Okay. Finance and insurance subcommittee has no updates. Does the conservation committee have any updates? Nona?
The only update I have is that people may have noticed that on the town website, there are multiple places where there are plant lists posted and they don't all agree with one another. So the Conservation Committee is preparing a unified plant list, which will include low fire risk plants, and all of the places on the website to point to that list will point to the same list. So that's in the works.
Wow. Well done. Any questions for conservation from MJ?
Well, I do want to make a point on that, Nona. So, I'm on this Zone 0 work group, and the way they're talking right now is that there won't be any plants allowed in the 0 to 5 area if you are in the very high fire zone. So I just want to ask that, that ruling is not going to come around till probably January, but you might want to save some space for a disclaimer like that on your plant list.
Yeah, I think everyone's in agreement that the zone nearest the house, 0 to 5 feet or whatever, is no plants at all down to bare ground zone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dawn, you now, do you have an update for us on anything else?
Yeah, so the district has done a sole source contract with a company called Flame Mapper to do all of our hazard and risk mapping, and they'll do the assessment of the entire district. Flame Mapper is they're going to be able to provide us with information on structure to structure ignition, which is one of the only companies out there that is able to provide that, which is good. So we'll be able to assess each of the different parcels that are, within the district. They've told me that they will have some preliminary deliverables within 10 weeks. So hopefully we will get a preview of what our maps are going to look like at that point in time. So that's good news. And that would be done, relatively, much quicker than I thought it would get done. So at least that'll be done before the end of the year. Additionally, we have a pilot program that we're going to be proposing for the Portola Valley area through our CPAW team that we're working with. We're looking at potentially doing a pilot program like the R4W sprint program that they did on Alhambra Court, but we would do it with about anywhere from 12 to 15 houses up in the Woodside Highlands area, Portola Valley. So that would be in the very high severity zone where we have known evacuation problems up there. And we would go in there with a group, including my team here at Woodside Fire and our inspectors, along with the CPAW group and Steve Quarles, who is the nation's leading expert on home hardening and defensible space. And I don't know if I might be able to share a preliminary flyer that we're going to send out. Let me see if I can find that.
Don, if you can't, I can.
If you can pull it up real quick, Jeremy, that would be great, because I'm not sure what I did with mine. I had a lot going on. So. But I'm happy to share. It's not done yet, but you'll get the idea of what we're going to be doing for this pilot program.
I don't know.
Can you make it a little bit bigger?
Yeah. It'll cut off the top and the bottom.
Cool.
These are the important sections here.
Yeah. So we've, I would really like, we started off, we wanted to do the wayside area, but I think given that I have a community member who's willing to help me out in the Woodside Highlands area, and I think it would be just as good of an area to work in. I think we're going to try to focus on the Woodside Highland area. And so you can see what the goal is here is to help your neighbors and the community better prepare for an increasing wildfire risks. We're going to come in with our team and we're going to do the exterior assessment and make recommendations on what they can do to harden the home and increase the survivability of the home by doing the defensible space work around the property. There's no contract or anything like that. They're not obligated to do anything, but just allow us to come onto the property and make those recommendations based on the latest science and what they're saying works to increase the survivability of the home. And so we're hoping to get around, it'd be difficult to do any more than 15, but we can start off this year by doing 15 homes in the fall and then make those recommendations and then let the property owners of those properties decide what it is that they want to do. So I'm excited about that program. And let's see, is there anything else down below, Jeremy, that we can scroll down to? Yeah, that's pretty much it there then.
I'd like to second the excitement that Dawn is sharing, having been part of these conversations and part of the group that took our CPOP friends, including Dr. Quarles, around town a few months ago when they mentioned to us that they would like to do a pilot program and then said, how about Woodside Highlands? I about jumped out of my seat and said, yes, yes, yes. So the attention that they're paying to this community is to be commended. And Dawn, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. A couple other things that we're working on with our partners at CPAW is currently a feasibility study is underway right now with a group out of Montana called Trust for Public Lands. And they are looking at they're doing a feasibility study of what the current environment looks like to do a ballot measure for some long-term mitigation funding for wildfire. That would be a ballot measure between the two towns in the fire district, town of Woodside and the town of Portola Valley. So that's currently underway. And as we get further into that, I'll share the results of that with this group. Another thing that we're working on right now is a grant. We have a grant writer working with us through the CPAW group who's writing a grant for planning purpose. So it's a two-part grant. One side of it is for planning. And on the planning side, I wanted to do a district-wide, community-wide protection plan for both Portola Valley and Woodside. So on the planning side, we're working on a CWPP, which will work great with our hazard and risk assessment. The two of those things go hand in hand. They work together. Part of the CWPP is a requirement that you do a hazard and risk assessment of your district. So that's on the planning side. And then on the mitigation side, since we're working with the town of Woodside and Portola Valley, the town of Woodside is looking to increase their defensible space matching funds program. And we're going to enhance that with some funds through the grant, if we get the grant. And then on the Portola Valley side, I wanted to look at different projects that we currently have right now in our county-wide protection plan that we did with San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties, where at that time, the current fire marshal, Denise Ania, and myself sat down with CAL FIRE, and we identified areas throughout the district where we thought we could, have some mitigation projects. And part of that, we mentioned Portola Valley in that at that time. Thank God we did that. And so now we're looking at funding some of these canyon projects that are throughout Portola Valley, where the access is difficult and the brush is thick in there, and it would be these would be good projects. So right now, currently, I'm looking at getting some estimates on what those costs would be, how many of those canyons we want to try to tackle, so these grants are big grants, up to $10 million. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we get that grant and we have some funding to do some of this work that desperately needs to be done. So what else
through the chair, this is Jeremy again. This is another area that is pretty exciting. We've had, I don't know, 4 meetings now with the CPOG group and Woodside and Woodside Fire in the town. And as we've been thinking about, some of these ideas to support work in town, this is the one that rose to the top of the list. Depending on what the grant asks for, there's also potentially an opportunity to emulate the best parts of Woodside's defensible space matching program to see if we can't do some things here as well. We're just seeing how it all sort of pencils out as it relates to the funding that's available. I think it's up to $10 million with some matches. So it was fantastic work, and happy to be part of it.
And then, of course, there's I'm also currently working on our code amendments, which I have started a draft, but it's in no way finished yet right now. So I think by October, I can probably share the draft with you and give you a better idea of some of the things that we're looking at doing for the 3-year cycle. So we'll look to discuss that part in October. I think that's all I have from the fire marshal's side.
Okay, does anyone from the committee have any questions for Dawn? Does anyone from the public have any questions? Great. Okay, staff updates. Jeremy, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a couple very quick ones. In addition to the grant opportunity that Dawn was discussing, Lori Benner, who's working with CPA, is also looking at the possibility of grant through what they call BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. So we're seeing if that's a possibility. That will, we've got a little time on that one, so that'll come after the district submits the grant for what Dawn was just discussing. And in the Department of Tooting Our Own Horn, I wanted to share that, I'll share this on the screen. The Governor's Office of Planning and Research, let me zoom in so you can see the other organizations that were involved in this. Community Wildfire Planning Center, CAL FIRE, Board of Forestry, and California Climate Investments put out a planning guide for wild and urban interface best practices. And the town is mentioned on page 19 under the building codes as a best practice. So it is great to get that kind of acknowledgement for the hard work of this committee and the other bodies that participated in the formal adoption. That's all I have. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, great. Any questions for Jeremy on the committee? Any questions from the community? Okay, let's see if we can, I don't think we're going to make our end time at 5:30, but let's see how close we can be. I just want to float the idea of possibly changing the day of the week and the time to either a Monday or a Thursday at 7 p.m. We will not do this if there's anyone on the committee that is not possible for. But we've had a couple of members that have requested it, as well as I've talked to several people who would like to join the committee, and 4 o'clock is just, they work, and that's just not going to happen. So I just would kind of like to open it up to members. Would a Monday or Thursday at 7 p.m. work for you? I think there might be 1 or 2 of those times that we could grab. I'd have to talk to Melissa.
Who's Melissa?
Nona.
I would love it at 7 p.m. Much better for me.
Dee, how do you feel about it?
7 would work. Monday would be better than Thursday for me, but.
Okay. MJ, did I see your?
Yeah, I was going to say Monday is better, but if we did Thursday, I think it would be nice to avoid doing the first Thursday of the month so that we don't have EPC and WPC meeting in the same day.
Yeah, I looked at the whole calendar and oh yeah, no. I looked at the calendar and there's only like 1 or 2 possibilities. On the Mondays, I think the first one is open. The first Monday of the month. The second Monday might be open. It depends on, the ASCC is all over the place when they meet, but I think that first Monday is open. And then on Thursday, I think the second Thursday of the month is open. So Craig, would you be okay with it?
Yeah, I think I can make either of those work. It looks like Thursdays are, there are other meetings. Sustainability looks like they meet this. Oh, that may be the 3rd Thursday.
Well, we wouldn't book it on top of any other meeting.
Parks and Rec is also Thursday.
Well,
so
then what?
There are other committees on Thursday, but I think if you pick the right Thursday of the month, you can probably find one that would work. Mondays look much more open, other than ASCC.
So Jeremy, I think if I'm allowed to do this, let me get with Melissa, see which Mondays and Thursdays at 7 we could do it on.
That's fine.
And then I'll just have them do a doodle poll, and you guys can pick what works for you. But then once we agree, we have to get the town council to approve. I doubt if it would be next month. It would probably kick in November, and we won't do it unless we get 100% buy-in.
Jen, we should be able at the council level to approve it pretty quickly. I mean, other than the agendizing deadlines, but if you talk to Melissa the next day or 2, she does a doodle poll, we get the results.
Okay.
We have 2 council meetings and we've got a 14th and the 28th. So that's
28th is probably what we're looking at.
yeah, exactly. Probably looking at the 28th, but it should be totally possible to get that by the 28th.
It seems like more people could attend our meetings too. Wanda, what did you want to say?
If they do a doodle poll, prioritize it. Don't just say yes Monday, yes Thursday. If something is the first Monday is better than the 3rd Thursday. So if we can display preferences, that would help.
Yeah,
Sure.
one, I think Doodle has an option where you can say yes, no, or not preferred. It has like 3 options, and so you can express that in Doodle.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, but I hear that everyone would really rather stay with Mondays if possible. Yeah. You want, yeah, definitely. MJ, I know said it, Nona said it. Okay, and I don't really care. Okay, that's great. Okay, and then we don't have to vote on that, do we, Craig?
No, I think it's pretty clear.
Okay, table at town picnic, 20 seconds. I'm gonna be there by 12. I'm gonna try to get there by 11. It depends if I can get out of the ranch. Patty said we can get to the town picnic through Westridge because they're gonna be closing the roads for the race. I'm bringing homemade cookies in little baggies with save the dates for the Wildfire. So if we're gonna have binders of material, gets really busy between 12 and 3. We'd love to have as many of our committee members drop by, just to kind of be with. MJ is going to join me just to be with us and to hand out cookies and stickers. And it should be fun. I haven't been to a picnic in 10 years, so this is going to be great. Any questions about the picnic? Cool. Okay, next is discussion of the August 3rd memo on new policy regarding texting and emailing during the public meetings. Does anyone have any questions about the memo?
I do.
Yeah.
Are we not going to get a class then? Because I haven't read that thing yet. But
Jeremy, you can answer that.
Yes, the short answer is yes. Melissa and Cara are developing materials, including a video that we should have out a little bit later in the fall here. And I think it'll be pretty useful and self-explanatory. Once you start to get comfortable with this, it actually becomes something of second nature. So we'll be getting that out pretty soon.
Right. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the community? Okay. We might only be 5 minutes late. The next item was just for information. It was a memo from the town attorney to the town council summarizing the Portola Valley response to California Fire Mapping Initiative and statewide wildfire hazard legislation. We will not be discussing it. Is there anybody on the committee that would like to make a comment? Is there anyone from the community that would like to make a comment? Okay. Our next meeting, unless we change it, is October 4th at 4 p.m. Is everyone going to be here unless we change it? Is there a call? I'm going to call for agenda items for the next meeting. We're going to definitely have that presentation by Dawn on enforcement on defensible space. Nothing else? Okay. Well done, you guys. Great meeting. Very, very exciting meeting. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye. Oh, we'll see you at the picnic. We'll see you at the picnic. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks, y'all.